Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Just lovely. How are you?
Just dandy myself. And I just want to say hey to all the listeners and all the YouTube viewers. Welcome back to Spooky Happy Hour.
Yeah. I'm Bree and this is Becca, and today we
Yes.
are going over season 1, episode 2 of Destination Fear at Old South Pittsburg Hospital.
hmm Super interesting, this one. But before we start off, we like to give a little update on what we've been doing. So what did you get up to this weekend since we film on weekends?
Yeah, today was so cool.
hmm
There was this metaphysical, like psychic type fair, like 30 minutes for me. I saw it on Facebook a long time ago and I just like put that I was interested in it. And then this morning it popped up and it was like, "Oh, are you going today?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. Yes, I am." So I ended up going and I probably did like 10 rounds. There were all these
What?
vendors, like crystals, rocks. There was this girl that was like an art therapist that she does like intuitive art sessions where she
What?
teaches you how to like connect with your intuition and then bring that into your art. And she has like paint classes and all these wild, crazy like things. And she was super, super talented. There were so many like psychic mediums, tarot card readers. The room was just full. There'd be like, I'd look this way and there were people doing like Reiki sessions with Reiki masters. I was looking over
What?
here and someone's crying and having tissues because they were talking to a medium. Someone else was getting like a tapestry for their room. It was super cool. So I decided, I was like, I want to do the tarot card reading because I've have you ever done
Yes.
one?
I actually did one just through this girl that I found on Instagram. She just kind of like does a session at home. You just send her the information, and I have it saved on my phone. And it was pretty wacky what she sent me.
Wacky like crazy that it like lined up, or wacky like I think she's a wackadoodle?
Like how accurate she is. I've
Mm.
done like a tarot reading session and then something else with her as well. Like we're not like meeting face to face. She's just doing it on her own time. But I was like, this is kind of crazy how accurate it is.
It
But
was cool. I feel like it was more like, in the Ouija board realm to
mhm.
me. And so from the time I was little and like really young, I would go to church all of the time and I'd be there like 2, 3 times a week. And at youth group on Wednesdays, that's when we would go. And one of the youth group leaders had told us about a time when she was in nursing school and they were using a Ouija board and then it totally like collapsed on itself and shut and got picked up and like thrown against a wall.
Oh
And she was like, ever since
my
then, she was
god.
like, I would never mess with any of that. And like later on, I guess, like, she found God or whatever. So she's telling us this as this tale of
What
like,
the heck?
stay away from it, right? And I've never
Mhm.
done anything with a Ouija board, but I thought like the tarot cards were kind of like in that realm. So I
Mhm.
also like didn't really want to dabble. Now though, that I'm older and like have experienced a lot more stuff and got into certain things by myself, I was like, I'm gonna try, like, what could it hurt? And so I signed up for her and I was walking around the convention and then I had to sit down for a little bit and one of the girls next to me had asked me like, "Oh, what do you think? Like, this is like my fourth time being here or something." I guess they
What?
hold it like twice a year. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm actually just waiting to get, a reading done by so and so." And she was like, "Oh, I've been to her before. She's amazing. You picked like one of the best ones here, but everybody's so good. So there was nothing that you could have done that would have been like wrong or like bad." But she's
Yeah,
like, "She's so great." And I was like, so I'm like on pins and needles. I'm just like waiting. I'm so excited. And
that's so cool.
I get in there and we just like start hitting off like right away, just chit chatting. Like her son was there. We started like I had this shirt on that said like mom life. So we're talking about like being parents. And she's like, "Oh no,
Mhm.
we should probably get into this reading." Like she was really cool. So
Aw.
we were connecting well already. And
Mhm.
then she puts my cards out and there were 3 distinct cards that I was, like on these, they're like not so specific that they're going to tell you, "Oh, I know exactly what this is," but
Mhm.
it wasn't as vague enough to like have anything and everything fit into that category.
Right.
So the first card that she had pulled was the death card.
It's
And she
not
was like, "Don't freak
necessarily
out."
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's like, "Don't freak out." And I was like, "No, no, I'm not freaking." She was like, "This can mean a lot of different stuff. I'm
Mhm.
not going to predict that you're gonna die, a friend's gonna
Yeah.
die, like,
No.
nobody's gonna die." She said, but she's like, "Have you recently worked really," she's like, "I'm getting the vibe that, like, you worked really hard at something and you wanted it to work out, and it's like you just realized that you had to, like, cut it out and let it go." And I was like, "Well, I
Mhm.
just went through a breakup, like, 2 months ago," that and that
Wow.
whole sentence kind of like describes that perfectly.
Mhm.
And in just like one sentence. So I told her and she was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense." And she's like, "I also think that you're like cleansing yourself of old patterns and this is like signaling this like shutting of your old self and you're coming into your own," which in our intro episode, that's kind of what we talked about, right? Like
Kinda,
being
yeah.
able to just like explore the stuff that I've always really wanted to and go
Mhm.
after it and not worry about all of the other stuff. So I kind of mentioned that to her as well. And she's like, "Yeah," she's like, "but I also see you have all of this stuff that like needs to go. You need to like pick it up and like put it somewhere." And I was like, "Oh my God, I have like a full basement at my ex-boyfriend's house still that still
Oh
needs to
my
like,
god.
come
Pick it
back
up
to my
and
house."
go.
Yeah. And she's like, "That's exactly what I was seeing was just all of these boxes of things that like you could probably keep like where they are, but you needed to get them out of a physical space." So that's what I thought was wild. Like, I think anybody is probably like, "Oh yeah, spring cleaning. That's probably what that means or something." But it was so specific because I have so much stuff over there still, which, not a problem, whatever. But eventually, like,
Mhm.
I will go get those. But now she's like giving me this push that says, like, "Hey, go and do this," because this is all part of that, like, grief and loss cycle, this like death per se of this experience, or I guess, relationship in my life. So I
Mhm.
thought that was really cool. Because it
Mhm.
was just so on point. And then the
Yeah.
moon card came up, which is apparently more about like my relationships, but she wasn't really telling me about relationships with other people. She
Mhm.
was mostly talking about the relationship with myself.
Oh, wow.
And
Ooh, it's
she's
gonna
like,
cut deep.
it did
Mm.
too. I was just like, "Ugh, are you psychically knowing like who hurt me in this life or what?"
Oh, no.
But
Oh,
she
no.
said, she's like, "I'm getting like the sense that like you're really highly intuitive." And I was like, "Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot." Like I get all of these vibes. I was like, most of the time I'm trying to like just stuff them down
Mhm.
because I'm kind of like that person that like needs something concrete.
Mhm.
Like I don't want to think someone's talking about me behind my back. I don't want to think that someone's lying to my face or
Mhm.
on the phone or through a text or whatever. And she had told me, she was like, "Do you often feel like you know certain stuff and then later on you find out that you actually did and you were right the whole time?" And I was like,
Oh,
all the time. Like
yeah.
where I thought like I had like a certain vibe that like someone was talking to somebody or somebody was talking about me or that they were lying to me, even though everything kind of like checked out or it was like it
Mhm.
seemed. And she was
Trust
like,
your
"No, you
gut.
are right." And that's exactly what she said. She was like,
Mhm.
"You have to trust this because
Mhm.
it's real and it's true. And your spirit guides are trying to tell you something and you're like
Mhm.
just blowing them off. So
Well,
trust your
even
intuition."
we were texting this week, on a few like occasions, we were like pretty much mentally in sync because
Yeah.
you're like, I was just about to text you this, and you text me something, and I'm like, I was just looking at this. I'm like, what
It
is
was
happening?
weird.
Like, it was so weird. It's just like maybe we were like mentally connected, or it is going to be a full moon soon. So I
We were on the same wavelength. We're just
think we
preparing or
are. Great
something.
minds think alike.
It
Also,
was
I am not drinking coffee. I'm holding this like
you're like,
I'm like,
getting its warmth.
No, it's it's still beer. I gotta finish that box of beer.
You're
I'm
like,
just like,
before we move on to the next
oh,
beverage
I
or
got my
choice.
sweater on. I'm
Yeah, I was
cozy.
gonna
No,
say you're cozied up. It does look like you're
yeah,
drinking some warm beverage.
no, it's a nice cold beer.
As I'm sitting in my reading, I had just like chugged a 16-ounce Red Bull before I got in there too, and ate nothing that at all this morning. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like feeling flushed. I have to take off my hoodie because she's telling me all these things that are like speaking to me, and
Yeah,
I'm like uppity on caffeine. So I'm like stripping at her table. I was like, wait a minute, like pause. I have to do
yeah.
this. I said, or I'm gonna like overheat and freak out. So she's telling me all these things, like I'm connecting to them so much, and then the last card that it was probably my favorite part of our reading was the Queen of Cups. And
Mhm.
she said, I think that she's like, I'm getting these two words that are coming to me. She's like, but I have no idea what they mean. Like, what does self-pay mean to you? And I was like, well, I said, at my job as a therapist, I said, we run all of our clients through all of their insurance, but sometimes like you're not credentialed with every single provider out there. And so if
Mhm.
my client, like if I'm not credentialed with that insurance provider, then I can't see them anymore. And insurances change all the time. People get a new job or they make too
Right.
much money or whatever. And so at that point in time, the client has two choices. They can either continue to see me and self-pay at full fee,
Oh.
or which is like $160 per hour. And to me, I'm like, I ain't worth $160 an hour.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I wouldn't pay a therapist that, you know? So she said that, and then the only other option is that they either transfer to somebody that is credentialed with that provider or they get referred out to a different agency. And when you see
Mhm.
somebody for so long, say like even like a year, 6 months, whatever, you already have that rapport established. But a lot of people are like, I can't pay that, so I am going to have to go somewhere else, and they do. But right now, I have the highest self-pay clients out of all of the clinicians at work,
Whoa.
that
That's
people do pay
amazing.
this much money to come and have sessions with me. And so she was like, this is an entrepreneurial card. She was like, you need to start your own practice because you'll have more time and
Wow.
energy and freedom to do whatever the fuck you want. She said,
Like this
"You're going
podcast.
to." Exactly, and then that's what I told her too. I said, "Well," I was like, "Do you know what else?" I was like, "1, I've always thought about the whole private practice, but I don't wanna do the business end of it. Like, it's just not something that I care about. Like, I'd rather have
Right.
somebody do that part, and then I could just provide the
Mhm.
service, and that would be fine." And so but I've never really talked about it out loud. Like, it's always been like, "Oh, yeah, eventually everybody I think that works in community mental health or something thinks about the grass is greener on the other side. Let me be in
Mhm.
private practice." But some
Yeah.
people go and some people don't. But I never really like thought about it or talked about it out loud. I just had thought about it. So it was crazy that she said that. And then I was like, well, you know what? On the spirit of like new endeavors, I was like last
Mhm.
week, we actually just dropped our first episode of this podcast that we've been working towards. And
Yeah.
she was just like, oh my gosh. She was like, are you serious? She's like, this is crazy. And so she's like, and it's so funny because she's getting excited about how I'm connecting to her message. And
Right.
she looked at me and she goes, "You are on the right path in every way possible." She's like, "Where you're at in your hobbies, in your all of your endeavors, in your work, like you are exactly where you're supposed to be. So if you're gonna
That's
doubt it, just
amazing.
don't." And
Wow.
yeah, I was like freaking floored. And then the funniest part about the entire reading was that she was like, a woman keeps coming up with a cat. And I'm like, I fucking hate cats. Like, they scare me. I don't
Not
like
me.
them. I'm like, this is, maybe you're pulling some energy from someone else because there's like hundreds of people in this room at this point. And
Mhm.
she's like, no, she's like, it's definitely for you. She's like, but she's really old. Like, do you have anybody who's like super old in your family, or like somebody that was really old that like had passed away recently? And I said, no. She asked if she was on my dad's side, and, like, I don't know anything about, like, my biological dad stuff. I don't know too much about, like, my actual like, the person that I call dad, like, his side of the family. Like,
Mhm.
I've traced some trees back, right, and I know kind of where his family comes from. But she had said, "Yeah, she's really old." She's like, "I think that this is a spirit guide. I don't think I'm actually talking to an
Mm.
ancestor." She was like, "I think this is a because she's keeps giving me messages for you, like, and it's not like family related, but
Right.
she's has a kinship with you, so
Mhm.
she feels really connected to you." And I was like, "Okay." And so she's telling me a little bit more
Interesting.
about her, and she said she's hundreds of years old. She said she's like at least 300 years old, and
That's
I think that she's
insane.
from some like European country. So I just did, well, not
Hmm.
just like maybe a year ago, I did the ancestry.com, the DNA kit, because like I
Mhm.
said, don't really know my biological dad. So I don't really know what's actually in my DNA and where I come from.
Mhm.
And one of them, I was like naming off the top 4 countries that comprise like maybe 60% of my DNA. And I got to Poland and she said, stop. She said, that's what it is. She said, the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. She was like, she's from Poland.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, I said, "That's, like, the coolest thing ever." So, she
Whoa.
told me her advice to me was to, get more in touch with my intuition. She thinks that I do have maybe a little bit more of those intuitive abilities, and I guess she does these women's retreat and workshops, and she was like, "You have to come
Oh,
to my next
so
one."
cool.
and gave me
Oh
her
my
card. She was like, "We
gosh.
will hone these, like, intuitive abilities together.
Amazing.
You need to come." And it was just, like, this most magical experience ever.
That's so crazy. That just makes me like want to see another psychic. That also reminds me the last time I spoke about the girl that I saw through the Zoom call in her car when we were talking about
Yeah.
dog sledding. She also talked about past lives. And sometimes it's like a give or take. Like sometimes you have to take information and just run with it. And if you believe in it or not, whatever. But she also was like, I feel like you're really connected to crows and ravens.
Mhm.
And I've always had this weird thing. Like, I think they are so cool. I have like a tattoo on my side and it's like dead, like a dead tree with like crows in it. And I'm actually getting like a tattoo at the beginning of next month with like ravens and like the moon phases.
Oh.
And she was like, you in a past life, and we're talking way back in the day, like way, 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 way back in the day. Um, she said that I used to have like crows and ravens and I would connect with them. But she said I was kind of like a hermit. And during this phase in my life, I was kind of hermiting myself. Like I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to talk to people. I was just more about the job. And this past life person was coming through and letting me know that you're not going to stay in this phase in your life. You are meant to move forward, and the job that I'm currently at is supposed to kind of bridge my way into the next stage and phase of my life where I'm more like talkative, opening up, doing stuff like this,
Mhm.
which I thought I'd never do. And this past life person was considered a witch. She could control the weather. She could connect with crows, and she lived by herself in an old hut. And apparently, the town's children used to call her like a weirdo.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, like
You're like a little old spinster lady in your hut with your crows.
yeah, pretty much. And I was just like, okay, I get that. I totally get that. And as I'm talking to her, I wasn't in this room. I was out in the like living area and I had like a crow thing like facing me behind me. And I was like, what the heck? And I was just like, that's so wild. Like,
That
I don't know.
is wild. And I
Yeah.
think that it's so cool because I would love to do a past life regression. They also had people there that were doing that. And it's like, I was so overwhelmed with things to do that I didn't know what to do, who to go
Hmm.
to. But I did get like a lot of cards. And I think that at some point in time, I do really want to go and do a past life regression because
Yeah.
I had a boyfriend once and his younger brother, he was probably like, oh God, I don't know, 4, maybe 5, I wanna
Hmm.
say. No, maybe a little older than that. I don't know. He was very young. He was under 10. And we'd go over to his house and my boyfriend at the time's house, and his brother would talk about stories like that he would have never been able to know. He was like, "Oh yeah, well back in the West when I was a cowboy or whenever I was a train
What?
conductor or whenever I was doing all of this other stuff." And he would tell all of these stories, and at some point in time, I think like his mom or his sister like wanted to look one of them up, and sure as shit, it was super true. Like they found exactly what he had been talking about, and they're like, "How would you know unless you were actually there in some sort of like past life or something?" And he was so young that it
Hmm.
wasn't like, I mean, kids' imaginations are running
Wild.
rampant, but
Yeah.
at the same time, they found something to like corroborate that, which I was like blown away. So that was the first time I ever
So
thought, "Oh wow,
crazy.
this could actually happen, that you could even have these memories."
Actually, if we do want to talk more about psychics down the road, if anyone has heard or seen any YouTube videos of Tyler Henry, I highly recommend. He used to be on like the E channel and he goes to like celebrity homes. His mom
Ooh.
drives him. He doesn't know the location or who he's seeing. And I think he's younger than me and he just isn't into like pop culture stuff. So he'll meet people and he'll have no idea who they are. And he'll like want them to have like an item that references who they're gonna like talk about or who they want to talk about. Like there's one with DJ Qualls, it was pretty interesting, and he gets in depth, I think, about his grandfather, and then he's seen like Khloe Kardashian, and he's seen like pretty like big names. And Melissa Joan Hart, who used to play Sabrina the Teenage Witch back in the day. And sometimes they have like family members just kind of like watching and going like, oh my God, like, did he actually say that? And they react. So there's like a few
I'm gonna
things
have to
on
check them
YouTube.
out. Now I'm
Yeah,
like ready to rock and roll with
definitely.
any of this. I'm like, let me go
Definitely.
consume all the content that I have.
Yeah. And he does like big conventions where people are sitting in the audience and he'll kind of point stuff out. And he does kind of like a drawing thing, like once it starts to kick in. A video that you should watch is the one with Steve-O, because he sees like a brain person and he puts this thing on Tyler's head as he's doing a session with Steve-O, and just like the doctors are looking at like the brain markings, and it's pretty interesting. So I highly recommend.
I'm gonna have to read some more into it, like Amy Bruni's book that I'm still reading, which I referenced last episode. I was learning so much about all of these different equipments, like dating back like, you know, decades, and how they developed and whatnot. And there is some type of device that like they put over your head, and like it mimics some sort of, like you were saying, like brain wave or brain frequency or whatever, of like when you get into a certain like type of state of consciousness. So much more to come. I feel like we could talk the entire episode
Oh my
about
gosh,
all of
I
those
got
things.
so many names that I could drop right now, but then we're gonna get way off
I
topic here.
know. We're gonna have to dedicate an entire episode just to talk about some of these things, because we do want to make sure that we get into Old South Pittsburg Hospital.
Yes, episode 2, Destination Fear. Oh my gosh, we're going back a few episodes.
Yeah, take us off with the history. What is and how
Yes.
did it come to be Old South Pittsburg Hospital?
How did we get here? So it is one of the most haunted locations in Tennessee. And just a disclaimer to anybody who is watching this, yes, I am reading because I can't remember shit. So
And
anything
we
to
want
do
to
with
make sure you get the
information,
best story, so it's here.
yes, yes. So don't judge me.
Never.
Never judge me. Old South Pittsburg Hospital in Morgan County lies in the foothills of Tennessee Mountain with a very eerie and disturbing past. The Native Americans occupied the land for over 100 years until 1777. Make note, 777's in there, people. You know your angel numbers.
Right?
This is when the Cherokee villagers were slaughtered by military forces during the Civil War along with the Chickamauga River. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, and the second to the Battle of Gettysburg, totaling 34,624 casualties from both sides.
We just need to pause on this part, because like the bloodiest after Gettysburg, like over 50,000 people between both armies were either killed, wounded, captured, or missing during that time in 3 days of the Battle of Gettysburg. So I just like need to let that sit in to everyone's brain. And I don't know, unless you've ever like really been there, right, to Gettysburg, like, and to see where these battles took place, and to just imagine what that must have looked like, all of these casualties everywhere. I don't think that people may have like the magnitude of what that really is. So I had to pause and put that emphasis, because that is a lot of bloodshed. So this battle comes in second to that. Like, geez. And this piqued our interest so much, because I've never heard of this before. Like, how can I hear of Gettysburg? But this was the second closest, with like maybe 20 some thousand less casualties, but still well over 30,000. And I didn't know anything about it. So we decided to look into the battle a little bit further.
Yeah, I had no idea until you even brought up like Gettysburg and all the deaths and stuff like that. But the Battle of the Chickamauga was the largest Confederate victory. They outnumbered the Union soldiers, and the Union Army did not expect to encounter them in this region. They believed that the Confederates had dispersed elsewhere to combine their troops with others in nearby regions, but that wasn't the case.
So the battle opened on Reed's Bridge, where soldiers could see their enemy coming over a mile away. Spencer rifles were first used during this battle, and they were massively efficient as they enabled the shooter to get off 14 rounds per minute, as opposed to the 2 to 3 shots per minute of an average Civil War era rifle. It was said that the shots fired were so heavy that General Longstreet thought new troops had arrived on the battlefield to take over.
Crazy. In this area, thick woods and swampy terrain contributed to this deathly battle. Historians have indicated due to this environment, commanding forces on both sides didn't have a field of vision that was helpful to strategically planning attacks. Instead, they often overlapped and unexpectedly ran into each other, leading to extraordinarily high casualties.
If the massive amount of bloodshed on this land wasn't enough, minerals in the area included limestone, which is said to be a conductor for paranormal activity, and it's also prominent in this area. So, limestone, water, and one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War sounds like the perfect recipe for paranormal activity. And then in
Mhm.
1959, 4 men founded the Old South Pittsburg Hospital. For 39 years, the hospital saw even more illness, more trauma, and more death, and it was officially closed in 1998 due to overcrowding and staff shortage.
We don't know when it transitioned to a paranormal research center, but currently they do both public and private investigations as well and hold various related events. Possibly one of the most interesting things, but also relevant to these hauntings, is that a natural base spring runs below the hospital, as water is said to be a conduit for supernatural energy and can enhance paranormal activity. The haunted accounts are abundant here, people.
Which makes total sense, right? Like we just said
Yeah.
that all of those different indicators that one location may have none of these factors at all and still have so much activity, right?
Mhm.
But this one has so much of these factors that no wonder it has the amount of activity that it does. So, what people were interviewed and other
Mhm.
haunted accounts from former people as well will tell you that a former doctor who died in the elevator is said to haunt the floors. He's checking on patients during rounds, and some witnesses say that they can hear him performing surgeries to this day.
Yeah.
A malevolent spirit occupies the third floor. He's terrorizing women and he's called the Creature. Witnesses say he's pushed and shoved women and can be seen slithering around on the floor, sometimes having green or yellow eyes. I don't know about
Gross.
you, but if I saw anything with eyes in general, that'd be wild. But to see it slithering on the ground like a snake with these
Yeah.
glowing multicolored eyes, like I don't think that I'd ever go back.
No, anything in the dark. Like even when you see like an animal, like a deer or something, it's like, what is that? Like just the light reflecting from their eyes? No, thank you. Like,
No.
could it get any creepier? Why,
Oh, it
yes, it
does.
can. It can, people. Next enters the toddler ghost boy Buddy, who legend says on the property, it is kind of sad though. He died from baby rattlesnake bites. He thought they were worms, but unfortunately they weren't. But if a malevolent male toddler and Dr. Spirit weren't enough, one last spirit is said to roam the halls. Nellie, a psych ward patient that is very territorial of her space and has a problem with men. But like, who doesn't have a problem with dudes at this point,
Exactly.
right?
And really, I mean, like, it doesn't sound like we have like all a lot of luck in the afterlife either.
No, actually, okay. The only guys that we really love here,
Mhm.
especially people in the Fear fam, we all know who we love. Tanner,
Mm,
Alex, and Dakota, like really, and Connor, of course. We love
of
all
course,
four
can't leave out
boys.
Connor. Mhm.
No, we love
So
them all.
none of these were those are just the exception that we're gonna go with today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think too, like the haunted history and like the history in this episode, I think intrigues me so much.
Uh-huh.
And with the haunted accounts, I really was thinking that there was going to be more maybe Native American like
Yeah.
hauntings that happened there because they had occupied the land and were kind of like casualties of the Civil
Yeah.
War. And then all these soldiers too. And it seems like, yes, they might have like made the breeding ground for this activity to take place, but a lot of the
Hmm.
haunted accounts, I was surprised that they were just centralized to the hospital when it was in operation. Now I don't know where the creature comes from, like maybe that is just the entity, maybe non-human, that had taken on this form and taken on all of the blood from the battle that's soaked into the ground and whatnot. It
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Like if you're not hearing maybe haunted accounts about all of the history that had taken place before it was a hospital, then maybe that one unexplainable thing, like where did it come from? Maybe it's just
Mhm.
an embodiment of everything that happened before it was a hospital.
Maybe like, has anyone really explored like outside? Has anyone done an investigation outside on the land on the property? Because maybe, I don't know, like would you get anything like Native American chanting or gun shooting? Because in other locations, when a civil war happens, you kind of get stuff like that. Like when we go back to Trail to
Yeah.
Terror, that one location, whether or not it is like Native American chanting, like residual sounds, or it could be a drunk guy in the bush making
Yeah, you
sounds.
never
We
know.
don't, we never know. But yeah, like that'd be interesting if to hear if anyone got this at this location.
Yeah, and I think that it's so cool that it's a paranormal research center, so I don't exactly know what they do
Yeah.
there, right, like, on the reg, but I would love to know, like, what comes out of that, right, and, like, what they are doing at the property, because I
Hmm.
know that when the crew goes into this investigation, they do have, like, some of those haunted accounts happen, like, maybe not, like, the physical type attacks or as much of the severity as what the witnesses have said, but they do
Hmm.
have their own experiences, so
Hmm.
the before they even get there though, definitely notable that at the beginning of the episode, they have an interview with a woman named Sharon, and
Hmm.
she had her baby at the hospital in 1982, and
Yeah.
when she was there with the baby, she was greeted by a doctor, and then later found out that there wasn't any doctor, like, no personnel like that on the floor at that point in time. She described it to people, and they said, like, "No, like, nobody here like, goes by
Yeah.
that description." I don't know who that would be, and she had said that,
Yeah.
like, he felt like another person. He felt her baby, she felt his hand or, a part of him, and that it was a real person, but everyone was telling her that no one was there.
Yeah, like she physically saw someone walk into the room. He kind of like touched the baby's back and like she said he kind of like grazed her a bit. And she was like, he wasn't translucent. He felt like a fleshy person. And I think Chelsea even asks her, like, so you had no indication that like this wasn't a person. And she was like, no, I
Mhm.
thought straight up this was a real person. And he even spoke to her and said something like, if there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. And
So she
left the room.
definitely came into contact with the former doctor that is said to
Yeah.
still be performing surgeries and checking on patients. She has that experience, and I think that that's wild. Like this doctor
Hmm.
apparently died from a heart attack. And so she believes that that encounter was there. And I think he died in an elevator, on one of the
Yes.
floors, right?
He
So that
started
is the
having a
same
heart
doctor,
attack. Yeah, like he started having a heart attack on the first floor and then he was pronounced dead on the third floor,
which
which
is
is
wild.
creepy, like
Well,
that
like,
amount
I'm
of time.
wondering, like, did you have the heart attack in the elevator? Did you have it in the hall and you thought, like, "Oh, I need to go to a certain floor," and, like,
Yeah.
did you crawl your way there? I don't know if I watched too many Grey's Anatomy episodes or what, but I just,
Oh
like,
god.
picture the most, like, crazy experience happening for this doctor of, like, "I need to get to an OR, someone take me, I'm gonna die," and then
Yeah.
he does die a couple floors up, and
Mhm.
to have that experience in the hospital, stay there, and still be checking on your patients. If I was a new mom and had a baby in the hospital and that came in, like there's so many doctors and like nurses and people that check on you all the time that like you would never like give it a second thought at all
No.
that someone was coming in to check on you. So the fact that
No.
that doctor looked like just an average person that was coming in, that was on the personnel on the floor, she had no reason to question it until
No,
she
and I
did.
think she said yeah, like I think she said they were like falling asleep, so I think she was kind of like not 100% there and like kind of woke up and then he was there. So unless he thought maybe she wasn't going to see him and then she did
Mhm.
open her eyes and he was just like, I better say something. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm here. I'm your ghost doctor, just checking in on you and your babe. Like,
Just
you're all good.
it's
See you
like
later.
panic. Yeah, like I don't know. Sometimes I think the paranormal also have rules.
Mm,
Like, how come we can't catch them on camera as often as we'd like to? It always happens unexpectedly. So it's like
yeah.
maybe there are, unfortunately, rules. I like to break rules, so that doesn't sound like a good
Right.
time
You're
to
like, give
me.
me the rule book and I'm just gonna throw it out the window. But just tell me that there is one.
Becca, you are going to purgatory now. You're just gonna live there.
Right. Like you need to be monitored somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Oh my god. Jeez.
I think that
But
when they get in there though too, Dakota starts to like feel it right away, right? He says like,
mhm.
"I feel different," like, and you can tell that he kind of like is like looking around, and I'm not sure like what he's looking for, but like he notices that his body is acting up. I'm not really sure what that
Mhm.
means or what weirdness he was experiencing in that
Yeah.
hallway, but they do end up going to a different floor, and then he says like, "Okay, it's gone."
Right. Yeah. He was kind of always verbally stating refill. He was always
Cheers.
saying, duh, I'm already on beer number 2.
Mm, gotta catch up.
Gotta catch up. I haven't eaten much. That's fine. But I think because he constantly looks nervous throughout this whole episode for some reason, but he keeps saying out loud, like, I'm nervous, like I don't feel right. And nobody else is really saying stuff like that. Chelsea was more nervous to go to the third floor due to the creature like terrorizing women.
Right.
But also, if we go back to the very beginning of this episode, I love how he takes them to Rock City to this little cliffside view area. It's like, oh, hey guys, let's go here. Let's see the views, blah, blah, blah. And then he sits her down and he's like, okay, so I kind of gave the guys a heads up. And
Break it to you.
I gotta like break the bad news. There's a spirit here that likes to attack women. And she was just like, I am not happy. I
And she's,
love
like,
how
always
bold
very
she is.
vocal, right? She's always
Yeah.
vocal. She will let you know what is up. She'll tell you about it too. Maybe in not
Yeah.
even, like, the nicest of ways, but she means freaking business whenever she talks
Mhm.
to you about this type of stuff. And we should let the listeners know too, like, if you haven't, followed the Destination Crew here so far to actually watch the episodes, they do
Mhm.
go to kind of like a fun place each episode. It's the
Yeah.
beginning of the episode and it kind of like ties in. And I won't give out all the confidential information about why it is that way because that's learned in the Fear Club. And what happens in the Fear Club generally stays in the Fear Club. So I'm not going
Yeah.
to give out that secret confidential information. But if you want to know more about those things, head over to the Fear Club, subscribe, and then you will get to
Yeah.
know all of this cool stuff that happens behind the scenes, why things are the way that they
Exactly.
are. And that is just one example is that they do go into all of these different places and it does tie
Mhm.
back to the original location. And he does break those he does break that news to her there, which is a perfect like fitting
Mhm.
area to be able to do it in. And I like how he goes back and was like, Tanner, I did it. I told her. Like
Yeah. Also, during that moment before he sits her down, we hear that lovely like accent that the guys tend to pull. He like goes around the corner and goes, Pinner. I was like, was that on accident?
I know, and I don't
Couldn't
know
cut that
when the,
out.
like, voice, like, started or whatnot, but they're just
Yeah.
so hysterical, and Becca and I were talking and like are trying to also incorporate these LOL moments, right? Like these moments from the episodes that make us just like laugh out loud. And I think that anytime that they do their little like weird little voice that they tend to do, it always brings so much laughter and this light, airy type feeling to something
Mhm.
that is usually so ominous and heavy. And we're getting
Mhm.
into more of the bulk of that part of the episode. And it's so nice that they bring those out in those times. It's a really great balancing act, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's just because they're so close with each other. Obviously, Chelsea is Dakota's sister, and then Tanner's been friends with him for years, and Alex has been friends with him for years, and they used to live on the same road as each other. Like they grew up together. So I think that's why I like the dynamic of how close they are. And I used to be a younger sibling too, so I'd pull that crap all the time on my older sibling, and
Well, yeah,
cause
and they have
terror.
that dynamic, right? Of like
Yeah.
they keep talking throughout the episode, right? They need to protect Chelsea because this is a
Mhm.
spirit that does like to terrorize women. And although that she
Mhm.
knows that and they know that and they want to be able to push those bounds and have different
Mhm.
experiments even for her to do, which she does, props to Chelsea. They all do have that kind of energy because I think they've known each other for so long. So they do try to protect each other and make sure that they're
Yeah.
okay. And are around at any point in time that they would need to.
Mhm.
They always keep an eye on each other and monitor each other, which I really like
Yeah.
and appreciate.
Yeah. I really like that as well. But yeah, like I guess Dakota starts acting up. He's feeling weird. And then they kind of mosey on up to the third floor. They kind of like sit down and go quiet. But as they're kind of like before they do that, they're panning around like rooms and stuff, and you can still see like toys for Buddy, and it's kind of creepy looking. Like the little bike in the OR is kind of
Yeah, I thought that
creepy that you
was
mentioned.
so weird.
Yeah, there's just like a
Like,
bike
that there's
sitting in the
just
doorway.
things that you wouldn't think that was, like, normally in there, but of course, people are going
Hmm.
in there, they're investigating, they're bringing something,
Hmm.
trigger objects that usually paranormal investigators do bring if there's, like, a toddler spirit. They want, like, a Boo Buddy, which is
Yeah,
this they don't have one in this, at least on
no.
Destination Fear just yet. They have, I think, acquired one, but, a Boo Buddy has a paranormal device inside that activates if something comes near it or touches it. And so they want to have those kind of trigger objects for children's spirits to play with.
Yeah,
But
it's a
just
teddy
seeing
bear.
that, yeah, like I'm like, okay, a teddy bear, cool. What is this toddler spirit going to do with like a little BMX bike? That's what it looks like sitting there.
It's gonna slowly ride it, and the pedals are slowly gonna turn. But
I'm
you need
like,
a
if
lot of energy to do something
that's
like
what I
that.
mean. Like, if you could take your energy and can like squeeze a little bear, that's one thing. You gotta pick up a whole bike and ride it down the freaking hallway. If I saw that, I probably would lose my ever loving mind. But I saw
The
that there and I was like, who put that there? Like,
The image that just came to my mind was the little boy from The Shining, and he's just riding his little tricycle down the
yeah,
hallway, and he sees the two twins at the end. I'm sorry, I had to
that
ruin
movie
that for
messed me up
everyone.
for life. Like, there's like, I don't know, a top three like movie that messed me up for life, and it was that one. Now, if I watch it, I think it's funny, but that is the reference that I kind of like put into my head too. Is like, what
Hmm.
was I don't know. It was very creepy. But if I ever saw that in real life, I think that I would just jet out.
I shit my pants, probably.
But of course, like you said, though, they are on the third floor. They're right outside Buddy's
Hmm.
room. They decided to sit
Hmm.
down and go quiet and go dark. And we
Yeah,
always know what that means. Something happens at that point in time.
something happened.
And it's like Chelsea starts to
Yes,
hear these noises, but I can't hear them audibly, like in the episode
I know.
at
Sorry, I was
all.
refilling. I couldn't hear them until like just that one last noise. I don't know if it's off of Alex's camera because he's sitting like
Hmm.
closer, but you can hear something. And they kind of all just go like, "Oh my god!" But it almost I don't even know, like maybe it's like something's being thrown or just like a tap or something. It's not too crazy loud, like a door
Yeah.
slamming, but yeah, that was kind of weird.
Yeah, it's like she kept hearing it. She's like, "Shush, guys," and then you couldn't hear anything. And so at first,
Hmm.
I'm like, "What is coming next?" And then they do end up hearing a noise. So I fully believe she was hearing something that the guys weren't picking up on, but also the
Hmm.
cameras didn't pick up on it. So I thought that that was super
No.
interesting. That like she heard it and she knew something was coming, and then there was an audible noise that they could hear, and that they do capture it on camera. And then that was like, I was like, "Oh, she was definitely onto something at that point in time."
We also have to remember though, especially with YouTube videos, the cameras on the mics can only pick up so much sound. You don't have a
Mhm.
boom mic. Sometimes boom mics pick up way more sound from farther away. So that
Right.
could have been why. Like you never
Mm,
know. And sometimes, like when I'm watching a YouTube video, I can't hear anything, but when you're in the moment, you can hear something.
sure.
So there's that as well too. But
So all of those little nuances from what equipment that you're using
mhm.
there, how you put it into a video, how you upload it and share it to the masses, right? There's definitely going to be something that maybe doesn't translate as well or something that you can't hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta
They get a lot of REM pod activity this episode too.
They
And
do.
I want to acquire one so bad. There's like
I
Hundreds of
know.
dollars. Ghost hunting equipment is so freaking expensive, but it would be really cool because it has so many. The REM pod has, it's like a detector for electromagnetic fields, but
Mhm.
there's also some other functionalities on there as well as like a temperature change.
Yeah.
And so there's different lights that flash up, there's different like sounds that it makes
Mhm.
whenever something does happen. So they do use the REM pod a lot in this, and a lot of it is that the motion sensor, right? That it says, okay,
Mhm.
the electromagnetic field is changing. I have sensed
Mhm.
that like that is there. I guess it's not a motion sensor, it's a, more of the electromagnetic field that it's sensing. So we get a lot of activity this episode using
We
that
do. Yeah,
device.
and it's just like a little round device and there's a little antenna that sticks up. And depending on how close you get, it'll get louder, and depending how far away, sometimes like you'll hear people say that's a full grab. Don't know how I feel about that, but usually a full grab means like you're grabbing that antenna and you're going with it.
Mhm, you're really, really close, and I like that
Yeah.
they kind of, like, demonstrate how that is too, like, they'll put a foot out, and you'll see that they can get so
Hmm.
close to the REM pod
Hmm.
without it actually going off, so you know you actually have to be upfront, really close and personal in order for the device to go off.
Yeah, because they put a REM pod there. And then like 30 minutes later, they hear footsteps, and then both REM pods go off at one point. And I think they said they put one near like Buddy's toys before they walked
Mhm.
away. So when that one starts going off, it's kind of like, is Buddy like communicating with them, or is it something else? You never know.
Yeah, and that's like validation, right? Like you can hear the scuffling in the footsteps, and
Hmm.
then both of those REM pods go off as if something was walking up to it. And I
Hmm.
think that it's really cool that they just don't have the shuffling sounds to go off of, but they also have the REM pods on there. So with
Hmm.
that type of validation, I think that it sets up for, the belief system that like, yeah, this wasn't debunked, right? Like it wasn't one of them shuffling around. It's a hallway that nobody is in, and you hear the scuffling and then the REM pod goes off. So having
Yeah.
that validating information too, at least that was probably one of my favorite pieces of evidence because it's like it's a two for one. It's a double whammy, right? Like
Hmm.
you have this and then it's explained by something else.
Yeah. 100%. I would love to have one though, but I'd be so scared.
Yeah, well, I think that like especially when it's in that long hallway, right? And you have two of
Yeah.
them there and both of them go off, like I think it's even validating to have one of them go off, but to have one go off and then the other one go off in like a succession, like you would
Mhm.
if you were walking by it. I think that is
Mhm.
the most that's like what speaks the loudest to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and then they notice too that like hospitals are really big, right? Like they're not going
Mhm.
to get
Yeah.
the whole thing explored by just being the 4 of
No.
them. So, they do split up into 2 groups.
Mhm.
Alex and Dakota go together, Chelsea and Tanner go together, and Chelsea and Tanner end up going up to Nellie's room, and they start taking Polaroid pictures. And this
Mhm.
has been a method that's been used for decades by paranormal
Years.
investigators. So,
Yes.
you're successfully taking all of these, like, pictures in rapid succession so that you're
Mhm.
essentially taking the same picture over and over again so that if
Mhm.
something does come up in one of the pictures, you know that it's not explained by something in the room because
Right.
you could take 7 pictures and 6 of them might be completely similar, and then that
Mhm.
one that's off, you know something has come into that frame, and they do capture this mist in one of the photos.
Yeah.
And it is kind of, like, very eerie, it's just, like, this blurry type thing that you don't get in all of the other ones. And I think
Yeah,
that they
and
ditched the Polaroid camera throughout the rest of the season, they start,
I
like, just
think
using
so.
their phones for the most part, but something
Yeah.
about the Polaroid camera, though, is just very, I don't know, Warren-esque, if I wanna call it that. It's like,
Yeah.
from all of those paranormal researchers, investigators, whatnot from decades
Mhm.
ago. It gives that vibe, that vintage vibe.
Yeah, because now we just like whip out our cell phones and then we start like snapping photos. But the thing with the Polaroid, even Tanner and Chelsea do this. They take like 4 photos, they set them on the ground, and then they walk away to do something else because you have to wait for them to process. And then at the same time, you don't want them to be manipulated by something. Like, you never know. And then once they go back, they look at them and there's a weird, like crazy mist like taking over the whole
They get
photo
on the walkies
almost.
and they're like, "Y'all, this is what we just captured."
Yeah.
And at the time, Alex and Dakota are having
Mhm.
their own experience, which I also
Mhm.
love this piece of evidence too, because
Yes.
they're investigating on their own, but they hear this metallic clanging type noise, and they're off kind of like in these different directions, right? Like one goes
Mhm.
down this hallway, one
Yeah,
goes
they
down
split
another
up
one.
almost.
And they hear it, and then they turn to each other, and as soon as they do, they're coming back towards each other, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Dude, did you hear that? Dude, did you hear that?" So,
Mhm.
obviously, neither one of them had, like, bumped into something. They both heard that same noise,
Yeah.
excluding whatever they were doing at the time, and then they find this object that looked like it was just placed in someone's path, so they thought,
Yeah.
"Why not replicate this? Like, see if we
Mhm.
can debunk it and to see if this was something that, really did get thrown, or
Mhm.
let's see if it was actually the sound that we could get to replicate." And they do. They
Mhm.
replicate the entire sound. As soon as they throw it down, it's like it was uncanny. There was no way that anybody could tell me that that piece of evidence wasn't that object being thrown.
Yeah, it definitely sounded like something threw it, and then it made the exact same sound when they tried to replicate it. But at the same time, Alex said something like it's kind of like toying with Dakota. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if it's because like he stated that he was nervous and he felt off, but everything seems to happen around him. And Chelsea even says like it's doing this to isolate us. But every time
Mhm.
Dakota seems to go off on his own, something happens. Even though if like someone's standing like 20 feet away from him, like that REM pod started going off like once he turned it on. And
Mhm.
normally someone would be like, oh, like reset it kind of thing. Like, let's see if it's acting up. But yeah,
That's
like, I
something you
don't
can't
know.
set. You go,
No.
you do the experiment, it checks out, and then you
Mm-hmm.
move on to the next thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the next thing, poor Chels.
Poor Chelsea. Poor girl. She was warned in the beginning, but
She was,
you
yes.
know, it's never a good thing when Dakota says, I have an idea.
Right?
It's
You don't
never
wanna
a
be
good
on the
one.
receiving end of
No.
the "I have an idea"
No.
conversation.
Definitely, definitely not. Poor Chelsea. Though it was kind of like a deal breaker for her. Um, Dakota asks Chelsea, well, pretty much tells her that if you go to the third floor by yourself, no flashlight, you don't have to sleep up here tonight.
And that's where the
And
creature's said to be, right, who attacks
yes,
women, so it was kind of like this trade-off that I feel like she couldn't pass up. If I go up
hmm
now, that means I don't have to spend the next 3.5 hours in this location.
yes, yeah. And obviously, the badass that she is, she goes up there and does it. And I'm sorry, but the funniest moment was like once she goes up there. Obviously, the guys are like around to make sure like nothing happens, but she goes up the stairs and she sees Dakota like sit down, and she's like, "You are not sitting down!" And he immediately like pops up, and she keeps walking. And once she gets out of sight, he just sits his little ass back
Oop.
down. It's just like, boop. I'm just wondering, like,
Hmm.
if she ever rewatched that,
Oh,
like,
I'm
did
sure.
he get a freaking talking to? Like, dude,
Absolutely. She was just like drill sergeant, like master, like you
yeah,
do this right now. And just the way he like popped up, but as
it
soon
was
as she's
so
out of
funny.
view, like popping back down, it was hysterical. And it's kind of like that classic like brother sister type
Mhm.
relationship. It's like they can
Yeah.
get sassy with each other and they can like, have that attitude. And at the end of the day, they're
Mhm.
like, man, whatever, fuck it.
Yeah, like, they're not coworkers, they're siblings, so I love that, like, little, like, back and forth with them. It was
Yeah,
it
their
was too
banter is
good.
fun.
It's
And
so
she
funny.
even like, when she gets up there, I think that she was on the floor for, like, a significant portion of time by
Yeah.
herself, and, like,
Mhm.
she didn't even well, we know that she didn't wanna do it, right? That wasn't
Mm-mm.
something that she was gonna, like, volunteer to do, and she even starts to do it and backs out. She's like, "Guys, I can't see anything." Like, she's just
Yeah.
looking through her little camcorder in night vision, and, like,
Mhm.
that screen's maybe 2 inches,
It's
like
not very big. It's, like,
no, not at all. So if
4
you're
inches long, 2 inches high, like, it's
right,
not
like, if
big.
you think that you're using that to navigate somewhere, you're
Yeah.
shit out of luck because you can barely see a darn thing in front of your face, and
Mhm.
that's not gonna give you as much visual either. So she kind of even backs up and she's like, "I can't do this." But
Mhm.
after she does, like, calm down a little bit, she's like, "Okay, I can do that. And, her goal was that she wanted to test her own boundaries. And this
Yes.
definitely did. But you can tell she's super scared. And she's up there, I think, for almost like 20 minutes. But then she hears that
Mhm.
big door slam and it's a loud bang. I don't know if it's a door slam. That's what I think of whenever I hear it. But
That's what I
just this
think, yeah.
loud bang comes. And then everybody freaks out and they're like, shit, we got to go find Chelsea.
Yeah, like, it's immediately when she sits down and starts to get comfortable, and she says it herself, she loves a challenge, so I think she just
Hmm.
wanted to just prove Dakota wrong, like, "I can do this," and
And she
whether or
did.
not I'm in the dark by myself, like, let's go, and, like, eventually, I think since everyone's so used to being in the dark, they're looking at their cameras, now they're, like, pros, hopefully.
Yeah. Hmm.
And seeing where they can go. Though the odd time down the road, we have a few trips and bumps and
Falls and this and that, which,
a
are
toilet.
totally,
A
I was gonna say
toilet
so many
gets
obstacles in their path that they eventually like fall over or overcome, whatever.
mhm.
Something happens and there do create some barriers, but they do get over them quite literally and figuratively.
Mhm.
Sleeping alone though in this location I think would be really hard. Just because they do have all of these areas that are like more centralized, right? Like
Mhm.
when they do end up picking out of the hat, um, Chelsea and Tanner are on the same floor. They're just at opposite
Yeah.
ends of that floor. So I think that
Mhm.
that is nice because they have the kind of like buddy system, but at the same time,
Mhm.
you are still alone. Someone's on your floor, but
Yeah.
you're not having them there. So it is a different experience. And then
Mhm.
Dakota is on the third floor where Buddy's room is and where Nellie's room is as well. And then Alex ends up getting the first floor by the death elevators, which she's just superbly excited about.
Oh my gosh, he's not excited. I just love when he leans into the camera and he's just like, I wasn't expecting to sleep inside. I thought I was going to be sleeping outside, but you're part of the crew. You're part
Mhm.
of the Scooby Gang now, so you
That's
have
right.
to
It's like
experience
dipping his
it.
toes into everything that's about to come for him.
Yeah, he did not look happy at all, but it's
Mm-mm.
just like since the four of you are exploring together, it just makes the most sense to have another person be in another location just to get more evidence just in
Mhm.
case. Like, you never
Yeah, and he
know.
says like, "I did not sign up for this." Well, you signed up to film them and now you're being filmed, sir. And that's just how the cookie crumbles. And I
Mhm.
think that that was like, it obviously sounds like that wasn't the full intention, right? Like his full intention
No.
was to never actually join them, but he does, and he does a
Mhm.
really great job. They all grow as investigators like we were talking about a couple episodes ago. I was very surprised by the sleeping alone, mostly
Mhm.
because Tanner and Chelsea and Alex, they don't experience that much stuff. But like if we're going off
No.
that theory that it is something that's interacting with Dakota or it's only
Mhm.
happening with Dakota has the most evidence sleeping alone out
Yeah,
of
he
anybody in
does.
this episode. So
Mhm.
the hearing talking to me, I can definitely hear that. He's sitting in his location and he's like laying down and
Mhm.
he sits up and he's like, I'm hearing people talking. And you can hear them talking.
You
And then he
can
gets even
hear
more
it.
activity later.
Yeah, you can hear it, but I can't really make out like what it's saying, like if it's hello.
Mm-mm.
It like to me it sounds like someone sneezing, like just
Oh,
from yeah, it sounds like a sneeze, but that's kind of a weird thing. But it is a
hey,
hospital, so you never know.
segue though, I was telling you the other day, I was just like sitting in my room and I was talking with a client via telehealth because I don't see anybody in the office. I see people over Zoom and by phone. And I'm
Mhm.
talking with somebody on Zoom and I'm here by myself all day during the workday. And I do hear somebody sneeze. And
Right.
I like looked to my left because I could tell that it was like in my room.
Mhm.
That's how loud it was that I thought someone was in the room with me. But I even asked my client at that time who had like some pets, and I said, "Was that you? Like, did a dog of yours sneeze or like something off camera that I couldn't see?" And they were like, "No." I don't know what you're talking about. And like I had to pause her or I had to pause them and I was like, okay, I need like 5 minutes just to like, time out, let me chill. And she did too. She's like, yeah, sure, fine. But that was
Mhm.
really weird. And I remember he's like,
That's
ghosts
so weird.
sneezing. But I guess hospital, right? Like with illness and whatnot, you
Yeah.
might think that that would be something that would be relevant to that location, but get a random sneeze in this room one day, and I was like, Who is here?
What the
Do you
heck?
have a cold? There are tissues over there. Please
Yeah,
take one.
like, how do we know that's not a residual sound? Because they also
Mhm.
said they could hear like doctors and nurses walking. And one of I think she was a resident of the area. She was like, you could still hear the elevator ding, even
Mhm.
though there's no electricity in the building. So
It's
you
wild.
never know.
All
Yeah.
residual sounds, so it definitely could have been a sneeze. For me, I feel like I hear, like, maybe 2 men talking, like, something in a
Oh,
very
okay.
low tone of voice, like, I hear it start and then hear someone, like, another, like, male's tone of voice, like, kinda finish. I don't know what they're saying, but that's kind of the vibe
Hmm.
that I was getting was more of, like, this male
Oh,
tone. And then,
interesting.
REM pod activity for Dakota just spikes. And he ends up being like, "No, no, 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 like, I don't even want this to continue at all," because
Yeah. Stop talking to me.
reminder, they're not like, they're chasing the fear,
Hmm.
they're not necessarily chasing, like, demons and ghosts and spirits and all this stuff.
No.
Yes, they wanna interact with them and they wanna up the fear antics, but they don't necessarily want to find them. So you'll see them in
Hmm.
these videos say, like, "Please leave me alone. Please get away
Hmm.
from me. No, 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 no. Stop doing that. Turn off that device." And you might be thinking, like, why? You're there for that reason, but they're really there because of the fear factor. They wanna up it. They
Exactly.
are already at their highest fear potential when they are alone and they are vulnerable. So when
Hmm.
all these things are happening and you're in a group, you can converse with other people and you can experience it together, but nobody's experiencing what you're experiencing when you're by yourself.
No, and whether or not you want to continue the conversation or not, it seemed like every time he had a response, it would respond back to him. So who knows? It could have been Buddy just wanting to talk to him. This little boy that unfortunately died,
Well, and
just
he says
connected.
too, like, if this is Buddy, make it go off, and it does. And so he
Hmm.
starts getting all of these back and forth, like kind of like direct communication.
Responses. Yeah.
Yeah. And so of course then he's thinking like, okay, it is you. So I don't want to do this anymore. This is freaking me out. I'm scared.
Okay, I know it's you. I'm done.
Mystery solved. Bye. Go play with a
Bye.
different toy. Leave the REM pod alone. But he does. There's like a couple more responses that Dakota does get, and then
Mhm.
by that time, it's kind of like the end of the night, right? Or should say the morning, and they're packing up and they're ready to go. Um, and so many moments I think that were very notable, like we mentioned today, in terms of evidence wise, so many of those laughable moments as well. And at the end of each episode, they kind of do this final wrap up, right? They're with their own point of view camera, they're pointing at themselves and they're discussing like what their summaries are. So they each give their own take on it. And for me, it kind of reminds me of the confessional and any like MTV like reality
The
show, right?
Jersey Shore confessional.
Yeah, or like Real World, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like they
The
just have,
challenge.
yeah, they have that. And to me, that's kind of what like came into my brain. I don't know if it's from all of your MTV talk that I've like listened to about
I
certain
love
things
you,
or whatever.
MTV.
But that's what I thought. I was like, they do these like confessional type diaries at the end of every single one of them. And Chelsea has mentioned that she's unsure about the relationship between her and Dakota at that point in time, because he did end up pushing that fear factor. He did
Mhm.
say, "Hey, here's an experiment." And she went to go do it. And I think ultimately she would tell you even today that she needs to have those experiences and she needs to have somebody to push her. Now, I think that sometimes whenever it's your brother, that can get like a little bit like
Annoying.
annoying, I'm sure, to be able to take direction from him. But at the end of the day, like that is what's making them all better investigators. But I love that
Mhm.
piece of every single episode where they do kind of have this like confessional diary type entry at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. Like in the very beginning, before they even get to the location, Dakota's like, we want to set goals for each other. What are your goals? And Chelsea is overcoming her fears. Dakota's is trying to be not as scared and react as much.
Mhm.
And Tanner was pretty much agreeing with both of them, but he was just like, what are my boundaries? Like, what are my boundaries when I get scared or when I am actually in that situation? Like you don't know how you're going to react. I do want to go back to the LOL moments though, when
Mhm.
before everything, like they do get like a loud bang and three of them hear it.
Mhm.
And then we've just got Alex like passed out in the main building,
Mhm.
sleeping away. Bless him. And he's awoken and he hears like a thud.
Mhm. I know, it's just like that, like, automatic thing that was like, "Oh, shit, I have to pay attention." But, like, when he
Yeah.
gets up and stands up and you see his full frame, like, his blonde hair is a little messy. He looks like this, like, old, lost man waking up from this, like, 200-year nap. Like, he's just awoken and his hair's messy, and he was like, "Who made that noise? Like, these kids get off my lawn,"
Yeah,
type
he
deal,
did.
and, like,
Oh my god. He was
searching
just
for a
like,
spirit to be like, "Leave me alone."
yeah, like the 6'4" tall guy, just like dazed and confused, and like the way he was sleeping, like like neck right against the wall, like super uncomfortable. And then he just kind of like turns around and he just like cracks his neck and it's just like, and I was like, oh my god, that was so loud. I could hear it on the camera. Just
He does. He just like all of his bones cracking and his
yeah.
like stature and all those nonverbal cues on his face. It's like you are this literal old man. That was really funny. I laughed at that
No.
too.
I thought we had to mention it. Um we also needed to mention about before they even go to their sleeping arrangements.
Mm.
Something happens. They choose all their spots and they're joking around. And where they're standing on the wall, there's like a restroom sign and just randomly falls.
Mm. That's right. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
It
It
just
does like in the
randomly
middle of their
falls.
conversation. And I think
Yeah.
well, they all react to it obviously. And they're like,
Hmm.
what the hell? But that's kind of like the
Yeah.
catalyst before like they start sleeping alone. And so
Hmm.
I think that they're all kind of on edge then after
Yeah.
that does take place because they're like, oh, well, this is what's sending us off into our sleeping arrangements.
Yeah. And I think that's the area where Alex sleeps. It's
Hmm.
just like right by, there's like a water fountain, and then right above it was the sign, because you can kind of see it when he's lying down. But another funny part was like once Dakota like chooses the third floor, we get the infamous Chelsea karma dance.
Oh my gosh, her karma dance is
Karma.
so funny. And I think that they do it so often. It's this is gonna like relate way later. We're talking into Project Fear days, but like
Mhm.
my son will run around the house sometimes and he's like, Dakota in the body cooler. And he's just like walking around the house doing his little dance, like, and he
Oh
just
my
keeps saying it over
gosh.
and over again. And if I
Oh
ask him, I'm like,
no.
oh, I'm gonna watch Destination Fear or Project Fear. I'm like, which ones do you want to watch? He
Mhm.
has 2 favorite episodes, Dakota in the body cooler and When Alex Throws Up. And we'll eventually get there, so you know exactly what I'm talking about, viewers.
I do.
But it's so funny because those are 2 episodes that stick out in my toddler's brain that when I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch this. Do you wanna watch with me?" He's like, "Yeah, this one, Dakota in the body cooler." He just breaks out in random song like that, and
Oh
I
my
just have to laugh.
gosh.
I think my son is my LOL moment for, most of these episodes too, because he just takes so
Yeah.
much. He's just this little sponge. So he
Yeah.
takes so much and then, like, will regurgitate it later, even in, like, the
Oh.
funniest of situations, and it actually makes sense, which is also, like, extra hysterical. But yeah, the crew's so funny. I think that that, like, is just an added element that they have to
Mhm,
have. Go into these
mhm.
locations that are dark, that bring a lot of dark energy, like, you have to have some sort of light and humor to kinda balance that out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We also have Dakota in the basement.
I
You'll
know.
find.
Oh, I'm so excited for next episode. So if you guys want to watch along with us, you can stream the
Mhm.
season on HBO Max, Discovery Plus. The next episode, we do end up leaving Tennessee and we head north to West Virginia to Sweet Springs Sanitarium, which you'll hear that name a lot on the
Oh,
show, a
yeah.
lot on the podcast. This is not
Mhm.
this is the first time that they're going to be there. It is certainly not their last. And this
No.
is just like one chapter in the Sweet Springs saga.
Yes, I am so excited for the next episode. So, thank you everyone who listened and watched today's episode. Just remember to like, subscribe, comment, ring that notification bell.
Hell yeah.
Just by liking the video, that lets us know you like what you see, and we're just going to keep bringing it to you weekly at this point.
Every single week, catch us every
single week.
Thursday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and whatever time zone
Mhm.
that you're in. Calculate that shit on Google yourselves, but we give you 2 time zones,
Yeah,
and
'cause I don't
we
know
will
the
see you
rest.
next week.
We will see you next week. Cheers and bye.
Cheers.